I made a couple of videos about full Advanced Squad Leader last times, but I decided to return into Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit. And today I am going to play Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit 3 and a very special scenario titled Clash at Borisovka. Why it is special? Because it is tank scenario only. Do not expect many of the scenarios like this in this Advanced Squad Leader. It is infantry-based game after all, and I think I can count maybe 3 or 4 scenarios like that in the full Advanced Squad Leader. Of course there might be more. I don't own many modules for the Advanced Squad Leader, so there are probably much more. I have about, I think, not sure, but definitely more than 100 scenarios for the Advanced Squad Leader, and there are probably 3 scenarios like that. So this is quite a rare situation, but it is also a very good situation to learn basics about tank combat. And I guess that's the purpose of this scenario in the Starter Kit 3. This is the first scenario with tanks, and we have tanks only, so we don't have to care about infantry versus tanks, artillery versus tanks, just tanks being tanks against tanks. If you watch the Girls und Panzer or the Fury, you know what it means. So let's play, but first let's take a look at all these counters and let's check what they tell us, because tanks are, or maybe in general, armored fighting vehicles, but I believe that so far Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit comes with tanks and self-propelled guns only. There are no personal carriers or trucks or anything like this in the Starter Kit. So let's have a look on all 4 types of the vehicles we are going to use in this scenario. First, we have such oval shape in the upper right corner of the icon that tells us what kind of vehicle it is. In the Starter Kit we are using tracked vehicles mostly, since this egg-like shape tells us that such vehicle is fully tracked vehicle. There are much more vehicles in the full Advanced Squad Leader, but in the Starter Kit we are limited to the very few types, so we will use mostly these fully tracked vehicles. This number in the upper right corner is number of the movement points. Vehicles are moving using movement points, and this is a bit different than movement factor that infantry uses. For example, because infantry can spend as many movement factor as it wants, while vehicle, when it starts moving, must spend all its movement points. It doesn't just spend 2 or 3 and say, stop, I'm not moving anymore. No, it has to spend all these movement points, even if it means that it wants to move just 1 hex and to stay here. It has to spend 1 movement point to move on this hex and spend all the remaining 50 points on this hex. Of course, this means that enemy is allowed to fire at it while it spends all these movement points. And this is also pretty important, because the more points it spends in its enemy line of sight, then it is easier to hit. Some vehicles have their movement points in red. This means that they suffer some issues with their engines, and they have to make a roll every time they go into motion. Because vehicles might be in the two states. First one, it just stays, and or it moves, but if it wants to move, it has to go into motion status. And if a vehicle with that has its movement points in red wants to go into motion, it has to make a roll. If it rolls natural 12, it cannot move. But if it rolls 11 for some Soviet tanks, you have to check this in your Advanced Starter Kit Vehicle and Ordnance Historical Notes. Sometimes such vehicle might have some additional issues. This is true for this T-34M41. If we roll 11 while going into motion status, we have to make another die roll, and it tells us how many movement points we already lost. I think I will be able to show this to you during the game, so it will be easier to explain. And next we have this white shape around the silhouette. This means how good our turret is. There are some kinds of turrets in this game. We have a couple of here. If there is a white circle around, a thin white circle, this means that such vehicle has fast turret traverse. This is the best kind of turret. It moves pretty quickly, and because of that we don't have a problem with moving a turret, even if we want to change our covered arc while firing at the enemy. If there is thin white square, like in this tiger, this means that this is slow turret. Despite its name, this is not bad. This is not as good as fast turret, but still pretty decent turret to use. A problem starts if we have restricted slow turret, just like this thick white square. This means that we suffer all the issues with that has slow turret, but also we cannot fire our armament which is in the turret as long as our crew is crew exposed. This is another thing about vehicles, that they can have two different status. Or they can be crew exposed, or they can be buttoned up. If vehicle is crew exposed, it can move faster down the roads, and it has a higher chances to score hit on the enemy. But first, some of our vehicles have to be buttoned up to be able to fire, and as long as they are buttoned up, their crew is less vulnerable for the enemy fire. Because if they hit our crew, then our tank might be forced to stop, or sometimes even to leave the board. Next we have vehicle's silhouette. It is not very important in the starter kit. It makes more sense in the full advanced squad leader when there are differences on the colors, but well, in the ASL starter kit, all you have to do is to remember of the facing, because just like guns, tanks have their covered arc, and it is always like this. You can see that its gun is pointed in this direction, so these 2 hexes, these 3 hexes, these 4 hexes, and so on and so on. That's how this tank can fire at the enemy. If it wants to fire anywhere else, it has to change its covered arc. Next we have its main armament. So we have a caliber of the gun. It is 76. It is a long gun because of the L here, and its rate of fire is here. It is 1 or 0 for the tanks here. There are not much of tanks that have a higher rate of fire, like 2 or 3. Mostly, if such thing happens, then these are usually war light gun tanks. Sometimes they have 2, 3, but it happens not very often. Also, there is a ground pressure in the upper upper left corner. And there can be 3 types of the ground pressure. Mostly it is normal ground pressure, just like here, there, or there. If this letter is not in the square or in the circle, then it is normal ground pressure. If it's in the square, then it is low. It is in the circle, it is high. It is quite important if our tank moves in the hard terrain and might be forced to perform a BOC check. Next we have a number of machine guns. There is bow machine gun, coaxial machine gun, and sometimes rear or anti-air machine gun, but all our tanks have only these two machine guns, bow and coaxial machine gun. Bow machine gun is in the hull, while coaxial machine gun is in the turret. So, to fire with your bow machine gun, you are checking the covered arc of the hull, while if you are firing with your coaxial machine gun, you have to check for the covered arc of your turret. And finally, we have armor factors here. Upper factor is a front aspect of your armor, while the lower factor is a side and rear aspect of your armor. If your armor is in the square, just like here, this means that you have superior armor of your tower. This means that your turret. Your turret has one level higher armor than your hull. So this tiger has a hull front armor of 11, but its turret is superior. This means that this turret has armor factor of 14. Why 14 or not 12? Because armor factor levels are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, 14, 18 and 26. So you have always to check for this to check what kind of armor factor you have, if you have armor superior or your armor is lower, because such things might also happen. Just like here, for example, this T-34 M41 has a lower armor factor on its turret, so its hull has armor factor of 11, while its turret has armor factor of 8. Sometimes these armor factors are red or are in the white circle. What it means? If it is red, this means that such vehicle is big target. If both factors are red, this means that it is very big target. That's a thing that rarely happens. If it is white square on the upper, below the upper armor factor, this means that this is a small target. If there are two white squares, this means that it is a very small target. Again, thing that happens quite rarely. So I think that's all when it comes to the to this part of the counter, but that's not all, because there are much more informations on the other part of the tank counter. First of all, this is a wreck side. If your vehicle is destroyed, it is flipped on this side. And what do we have here? First, we have special ammo availability. Sorry, tongue twister. Availability, and this is the same like when it comes to the ordnance. So all these tanks have a chance to use APCR ammo, and it is different, of course, for each of them. We have 9043 for the purpose of this game, so we will use always a column with 3. Next, there are some more informations here. Luckily, a lot of them are for full advanced squad leader only. So, for example, crew survival rate, radioless status. These are the things we can ignore for now, because we are not going to use them in the starter kit. But of course, there are some more informations that we need. First, morale level of 9. This means that this Tiger has excellent crew, because Tiger's crews were creme de creme of the German army, and their morale is 9. And now some of the special equipment these vehicles might have. S is availability of the smoke shells. So if you want to fire your smoke shells, you have to roll 8 on your to hit die roll. SD is a smoke discharger. It allows you to place a big smoke counter on your own hex. And do we have any other things from the starter kit? I believe no. I believe that's all. Yes, there is Ash here. It stands for Schützen, and again this is full Advanced Squad Leader stuff. So I think that's all. So now, if we know about our weapons, so we can take a look on the board and on our victory conditions. First, north is here and south is there. I placed my boards like that because it will be easier for me to record, but you have to remember this is a north. And that's why this counter for north from the full Advanced Squad Leader comes in handy here, because it is pretty important not only for the setup but also for the victory conditions, because Soviets are entering from the north. And now for the victory conditions. The Russians win at the game end if they eliminate more armored fighting vehicles than the Germans. Each Russian armored fighting vehicle exited off the south edge counts as eliminated German armored fighting vehicles. So each Soviet vehicle that leaves the board through this edge counts as eliminated German vehicle. And Soviets have 10 vehicles, while Germans have 6. This means that if the Soviets would be able to evacuate all their vehicles through the south edge, they would just win. Pretty easy, right? Well, not really, because German tanks are definitely superior when it comes to the guns and their turrets. So I think Germans are going to take a defensive tactics in this game, seeking for good positions on the board and then trying to destroy as many Soviet tanks as possible. As for Soviets, well, I think it depends how it will go. If they will be able to evacuate at last 7 of their vehicles, they will win instantly because Germans have only 6 vehicles. But to make it happen, they cannot lose more than 3 vehicles. So this can be hard. Their vehicles are quite fast. I think this is their higher advantage. Even this weaker Ely T-34 have 17 victory points, while the others have 16. On the contrary, the fastest German tank has 14 movement points, and this Tigers has only 12. So they aren't as fast as Soviet vehicles, but their armor is pretty good, especially when it comes to the Tiger. But Soviet armor is not bad at all. It is 11-6, and well, here we have a turret, inferior turret, but still it is better than Panzer IV and not much less than Tiger. So I think that Soviets might have a good chance to win this game, but like always, die will tell us the truth. There is one more thing I would like to talk about before we will start our game. It is target acquisition. Normally I use one kind of target acquisition for each side, but here we have to use at last 2. Why? Because we have 2 types of vehicles on each side, and if you have 2 or more vehicles, it is recommended to use different color for different type, because it will be easier for you to remember which counter acquisition belongs to which type of the vehicle. And as for this, I'm going to use this dark red for this and this orange for these tanks. Same goes to Germans. I have 2 types of my counters, and these black counters are going to be used for them, while these 2 green counters are going to be used for them. I think that if you have a starter kit only, you might have a problem with a proper number of motion counters. I remember that when I played this game and I owned Starter Kit 3, I never had enough motion markers for all these vehicles. I don't know if my copy was lacked something, but I think not. I think this might be a problem if you have a lot of tanks in the starter kit. Luckily, I have no issues now because I have full offensive squad leader, which comes a lot of these counters, and a lot of counters in general, of course, but you might find a problem to use all of them. Luckily, Germans are moving a lot at the beginning of the game, and then they mostly are waiting on the good defensive position to destroy as many Soviet tanks as possible. Just like every time I play starter kit scenarios, I recommend you to get this very handy Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit 3 summary. You can get it from Board Game Geek, and it is extremely helpful thing that describes every action allowed in every phase, and in a very detailed way tells you what, where and how can you do it. So here is my setup for the scenario, since Soviets are coming from this part of the board. So that's my plan. I'm going to move all these 6 tanks in column down this road, while these 4 tanks will enter game with board T. All of them are starting crew exposed, because they are going to move down the road, and when you are crew exposed, you spend 1 movement point for moving down the road. So it is quite handy to be crew exposed, but yeah, there is always a but. Our tanks have a restricted slow turret traverse. This means that they can only fire if they are buttoned up. It is important to remember that you can change from crew exposed to buttoned up and vice versa only once per phase. So you can't, for example, just make some move in the crew exposed, then go buttoned up, move some more, and then go crew exposed again. No, you can only do it once per phase, and you can do it in the movement phase and in the advance phase. So it is pretty important to remember about it, because as for Soviets, it is an essence if they can't fight or not. These 2 tanks are always starting crew exposed because they are going to move down the road, while these 2 are going to move down the terrain, so they are starting buttoned up. Alright, another important thing to remember: if a vehicle enters from the hex from which yet another vehicle entered, it has to spend a number of points equal to the number of the vehicles that entered from this hex before. So, for example, if this vehicle enters the game, enters the board, let's say it moved here, I will move it later. Then, if this vehicle enters, it has to spend a half of movement point before it will enter the game, because these hexes that are out of the board are always the same as the one that you are using to enter the board. I think when I will show you how it works, it will be easier to understand. Okay, that's all. We can start our game. We are starting with rally phase, nothing to do. Next we have prep fire phase, again nothing to do. So we go into the movement phase when we are going to start moving. Let's start here. This tank starts with this hex, and it is in motion, and it is buttoned up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, I am moving 8 points only, because special setup rules say Soviet tanks enter on the turn 1 along the north edge, having already expended half of their movement points. So it has 16, so it can only move 8. And since I moved 8 points, I am still in motion. Important thing to remember, we have a march. Because we have a march, grain is not in season, so these all hexes are clear terrain. Next, this tank. It's not entering from the same hex as this tank did, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's how they moved. These two T-34s are next to go. They are starting crew exposed. So a half, 1, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8. That's where it stops. And now this. A half, 1. A half, 2.5, 3. 3.5, 4. 4.5, 5. 6, 6.5. 7, 7.5, 8. As you can see, it is direct. They are in the column, and they are all still crew exposed, so they will still be able to use their road bonus. They are also all in motion, so they will be a harder target for the enemy if any of the enemy tanks will enter the board and will try to hit them. Of course, it makes them definitely less effective if they are going to fire, but I don't think they will be in the good position to fire at the enemy, because enemy tanks will be also entering the board. So there is a small chance that they will move closer enough for them to score any good hit. And staying in motion means that they will be relatively safe. Now them. He starts crew exposed and buttoned up, and half, 2.5, so it's 3, sorry, yeah, half, 2.5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 8, 8.5. Because it has 17, so it can move 8.5 points. And that's where it starts. So all the others are moving in the same fashion. Let's say they are moving all like that. So they are in column. You may have a problem, especially if you are playing starter kit only, with a number of these motion and crew exposed counters. In fact, there is a little chance that you will have enough of them for all the vehicles in this game. If you face such a problem, and the answer is to make some note at the beginning of the game that, let's say, only vehicles that are crew exposed or only vehicles that are buttoned up, the choice is yours, have to use the counter. Otherwise, let's say they don't have to, they are crew exposed or buttoned up by default. And if you have a problem with motion counters, then you might use such a solution. If they are all together in the column, you can for example take only mark only first and the last tank with the motion, and you cannot mark all of them. It says that all of them together are in motion. So I think this might be useful if you don't have enough of these counters. I have exactly the number I need for this game, and please note that I have full Advanced Squad Leader game. So I don't think that starter kit comes with enough markers. Okay, that's all with the movement phase. We have now defensive fire phase, but there is no enemy vehicles on the board. Next we have advancing fire phase, nothing to do. Road phase, nothing to do. And next we have advance phase. In the advance phase, vehicle might change its status from crew exposed to buttoned up, or vice versa. So the question is if I want to do. I don't think they need it. I think they will rather move with the road bonus later. As for them, the situation is different. Enemy might come soon, and there is a lot of clear terrain here, so they might target them. So I think that at last this vehicle will change into buttoned up. This one as well. It is pretty important to remember remember about facing, because if you have a vehicle with a turret, then this counter must be placed directly in the same way than the turret that the turret is facing. Of course, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be in the same direction all the time. It can be changed during your movement, but you always have to remember about it. And I think they will also go buttoned up. Alright, that's all for them. And that's all for the advance phase. Next we have close combat phase, nothing to do, so let's go to Germans. Okay, it's time for Germans to go. Now, what's my plan? Since Russians already moved, I know what's their plan, and now I can prepare a proper warm welcome for my Soviet friends coming for a party. So, I'm going to use my Panzer Force on this board mostly. Why? Because there is a couple of ways that I need to protect. I would like to control this junction, this valley, this area, so I need some more tanks, because these hills are going to block line of sight. So I won't be able to, for example, place just one tank here and take care of this whole area. While my Tigers will take care of this area, well, there's much more clear terrain. They are armed with deadly 88 weapons, so I think these two Tigers should be able to take care about everything around, while Panzer Force are going to prepare some welcome for Soviets on this board. So let's start moving. All my German tanks are entering with crew exposed and with in motion status. Of course, they can be crew exposed and fire, because none of them has restricted slow turret traverse. And when they are firing while crew exposed, they get some nice bonus. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I spent 10 movement points to reach this hex, and now I will use my dice to mark my number of movement points that I spent. Judging on my own experience, this is one of the things that you can forget much easy. Actually, the number of points that or movement factor or movement points that I spent, and then I was forced to pause to do something else, is something that I tend to forget quite often. That's why I often use dice to remember about it. Okay, why I'm stopping? Because I think that Soviets can see me. Let's check it out. Yep, I am in their line of sight. They can see me, I can see them. What it means? Well, let's check for their covered arc. These are these two hexes. So yes, I think they can fire at me, but well, they don't want to. First, why? They are in motion. German tank is in motion. There is also a hindrance. This totally makes impossible shot. And the range is pretty high. And as long as they are in motion, they are not even able to place target acquisition marker. Sometimes it makes sense to fire with impossible shot. I mean a shot that modifiers makes impossible to hit. But if you are allowed to place target acquisition marker, it is still worth to try. Of course, there is still a risk that your weapon will be damaged during such firing, but it still gives you something. Otherwise, but just ignore it. Okay, so we had 10, 11, 12, 13, and while moving 13, I am also moving my turret like that. 13 and 14. I am spending my last movement point to stop. So this tank ends its movement with its turret like that, and it is not in motion anymore. So it will be easier for him to fire at the upcoming Soviets. Okay, next one is this Panzer IV. A half, 1, a half, 2, a half, 3, a half, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. It stops. There is an option for you to fire during the movement phase. It is called bounding first fire, but actually it is the last moment you want to fire. Bounding first fire is good for the one situation when you are certain that enemy is going to fire at you during this movement phase, and you want to fire at him first, or you want to take care of him before he will target any other of your vehicles. Then you are welcome to use it. But otherwise, it is recommended to avoid bounding first fire, because bounding first fire is not allowing you to place target acquisition. It comes with a lot of nasty modifiers, and it is definitely harder, much harder to hit during the bounding first fire than any other way of firing with your tank. Actually, it makes much more sense to wait till the advance phase, but sometimes you have to. But if you don't have to, you'd better wait. That's why I'm not firing now. I'm going to wait, or maybe... No, I think this hill blocks my line of sight for them anyway, and this wood too, so no, I cannot even fire at them. Good. Okay, now this tank, it enters from the same road as this tank, so it has to spend a half of movement point. A half, 1, a half, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, it stops. Now this tank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, it stops. Alright, that's all for them. Now we have these two tigers to go. I will start with this tiger. A half, 1, a half, 2, a half, 3, a half, 4, a half, 6, a half, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. It stops. And finally, my last tiger. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 it stops. So that's all for Germans. They spent all their movement points, and now we have Soviet defensive fire phase. Soviets may now fire if they want to, but we have to remember that most of the Soviets are crew exposed. This means that they cannot fire. Only Soviets with buttoned up are allowed to fire. This means that these 3 vehicles and these 2 vehicles are allowed to fire. Now you can see, if you are a German and you will fire during the bounding first fire, there is still small chance for you that you will hit enemy and he won't be able to fire at you during defensive fire phase. But now Soviets have to choose. Well, they are in motion, so it would be still very hard for them to score a hit at any shot at the enemy. But well, let's try. This T-34 decides to score a hit on him. Okay. Can they see each other? Definitely they can. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So these are 14 hexes range. And now we have to check for our basic to-hit number. And I have a bad news. If we are firing with Soviet tank with 17.6 long gun on the range 13 or higher, we are going to do it as area target type. You can see this is red. Of course, this means more problems. So let's calculate, let's check for modifiers. As for modifiers, there is a long, big line of modifiers, to-hit dice roll modifiers. They are into 2 groups, fire-based to-hit and target-based to-hit. You can see there is a lot of my notes that I made during this game because, well, English is not my first language, so when I was learning this game I made it much notices to remember about some things. Okay, so they are divided into cases, so let's check for them. Case 1. Fire in advancing fire phase for gun, special weapon, mortar, vehicle that did not move. No, we are firing in the defensive fire phase. Next, peanut fire, no. Non-qualified use, guns only, no. Captured use, no. Double time, no. Leadership, non-available for guns and vehicles. In fact, in the full advanced squad leader, there are counters for the leaders of tanks and any other vehicles, but in the starter kit they are not. Smoke, no, we are not firing smoke. Guns and vehicles only. Covered arc change, no. We can see him normally, we don't have to move our turret anywhere. Intensive fire, no. What is intensive fire? If you lost your rate of fire and you want to fire again, you are allowed to do it with intensive fire. But it goes with a certain limitations. First, you have to add additional +2 modifier to your to-hit die roll, and your breakdown number of your gun goes down by 2. So, this is a hazardous action. Fire within hex? No. APCR, APDS at the range higher than 13? No. Next is for light anti-tank weapons only, so we are using normal weapon. So next group is for vehicles only. Buttoned up. Yes, we are buttoned up and we have to be buttoned up, otherwise we wouldn't be able to fire. So, +1. Bounding first fire? No. Stun? No. Motion non-stopped fire? Yes. We are suddenly in motion. And there goes. This means at case 14 and lower die doubled. Motion defensive fire uses advancing fire phase line of case 14. What it means? We are moving up to the case 14, which is bounding first fire, and we are using a line in advancing fire phase or bounding first fire. So we have slow turret, so we have to add +4 because of this case. So now we have +5. We have +1 because we are button it up, and +4 because of this case. And we have to remember that we will have to double the result of our lower die. Next, TAM, no, we have no TAM. Hindrance, no hindrance. FFNAM, FMMO, no. Acquired target, no. Target using hazardous movement, no. Gun vehicle size, no. This is, oh wait, yes, this tiger is big. Yes, you can see his armor factor is red, so he is a big target, so we have -1. So we had +6 and now we have +5. Area fire, yes, we have +2 because you can remember that our 2-hit number was red. So we have +7. Versus motion or moving vehicle, no, he is stopped. 1 hex range, no. So our total modifiers are +7 and our 2-hit number is 6. This means that this shot is impossible. We are not going to achieve anything with this shot, but even so we will have to make a roll. Why? Because there is still a risk that we will roll twice, 12, and we will get our weapon damaged. So let's make a roll. It's 9, it is a miss, and because we are in motion, we are not allowed to place target acquisition. It sucks. So I'm going to mark him with final fire, and you can see that the Soviets have no other opportunities to fire, because all of their attempts to fire at the enemy would result like that, because they are in motion. So no more defensive fire for Soviets. I can remove this marker, and we are going into the advancing fire phase. Actually, Germans are not in much better situation. Well, they are not in motion, so their chances are a bit higher, but even so, it is mostly impossible that they will score a hit, but even so, they are welcome to do it, because they might put target acquisition on the tank they tried to hit. So let's start. Of course, it always comes with a risk that their main weapon will be damaged. I will start here. What is my 2-hit number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh shit. Okay, 13. 13 on the 75mm long German gun. It is seven. It is 7. And now our modifiers. I'm not going to go through all these modifiers, but now we are making a bounding fire. So let's go to the case 14, and we need to use advancing fire phase verse. So we are fast turret, so we have +4. Okay, we have +4 now. And now, any other modifiers? Yes, enemy is in motion, so we get +2. So it is totally of +6. No any other modifiers, but still it is +6, and our 2-hit number was 7. So you can see impossible shot. Oh, I was afraid it will be 12. Alright, so even so we are able to place target acquisition. Our tank is marked with C, so let's check for C and let's place it here. And he is marked with bounding fire. Anyone else? I believe this tiger is going to fire at him. Situation is mostly the same, this is impossible hit, but I'm going to make it just to get target acquisition. 8. Alright, so his weapon is not damaged, so I am placing A. I don't remember if I told you before, I think I did but I'm not certain, that if you have two different types of vehicles, it is good to use two different types of target acquisition counters, because it would avoid a situation when you are not certain which counter belongs to each tank. For example, if you have two tanks with letter A, just like I have here, this A for Panzer IV and A for Tiger, then it would be a problem. That's why I use black counters for Panzer IVs and green counters for Tigers. And same goes to Soviets. I have red counters and orange counters for my different type of T-34s. Okay, am I going to do something more? Actually, I'm not certain. Yeah, you may ask why. You can always get more target acquisition markers. Yes, but I can also damage my own guns. And I don't have much more tanks. So I think this will be enough. I think I'm not going to fire more during the advancing fire phase. And I am finishing my bounding fire attempts. So that's all for the German advancing fire phase. And next we have a road phase, nothing to do. Advance phase. Germans are not going to change their status. They all want to be crew exposed. And now we have close combat. So that's all for this turn. And I think this is a good moment to stop this video, because I spent a lot of time explaining everything, and in the next part of the video we will go right into our game. There will be definitely much more action, much more shooting, much more tank destroying and stuff. But as for today, that's all. Thank you for watching and see you next time.